What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, I had a video here that I wanted to talk about and kind of bring some things up about this because it's been gaining a lot of traction for specifically the Indianapolis Colts side of things because we're talking about quarterbacks. One particular topic that I wanted to discuss over the last few days has been about the S2 cognition test results for the 2023 quarterback draft class. So, first things first, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, each quarterback gets, and almost every player gets one of these, is an S2 cognitive test, which basically tests their cognitive ability, which their responses to how things are done, how quickly they get it done, how effective they are, all of this stuff, right? So it's testing not necessarily your football IQ, but kind of just testing your reflexes, your abilities, your instincts, your other things like that that go into, kind of what makes up your mind when it comes to a player, right? And that can be kind of important when it comes to the quarterback situation because we have seen, guys who can think quick on their feet a lot of times are most of the time are successful quarterbacks in the league. You get a lot of people who do very well with those. Just some examples of guys in the league now that tested really well. Patrick Mahomes is one of them. Joe Burrow is one of them. Justin Fields is another one. I'm sure there's more. But then there's also another guy by the name of Brock Purdy, the quarterback from San Francisco. So, guy that was drafted last pick in the draft just a year ago, had one of the best cognitive test results of anyone in the draft class the previous year. And, still ended up getting picked last. So I want to say this, that apparently there's a tweet going around about supposedly who the test results, there was a leak of the test results for the quarterback draft class, and it had Bryce Young at the top with 98%, and it supposedly had CJ Stroud at the very bottom with 18%. All right, so that's the 18th percentile. So it's not a very good score, not at all. It's basically just bombing the crap out of it. So here's the thing. So the S2 cognitive test owner, the guy who created the test, went out on a podcast on PFF and stated that the leaks that were out were supposedly fake. They were fake is what they were saying. So if anyone had seen that tweet like me, you would sit back and you'd say, wow, that looks really bad. Now, supposedly that number is fake. So it does provide a little bit more clarity for things when it comes to that. I never bought that was an 18%. I could never buy that for a second. But nevertheless, we did hear multiple reports that Stroud did not test quite as well as some of the other guys, which is okay. That happens. But I think the number is being very it was being exaggerated to boost ratings on a scale. So with that in mind, so let's kind of just talk about it for a second. So how important is this for a quarterback to determine their, success in the league? And is it something that, could make the Colts change their minds about who they want to have? Well, supposedly Bryce Young tested really well. Will Levis tested really well. Anthony Richardson tested okay. He tested pretty well. And then Stroud didn't quite test as well as some of these other guys did. So I think of it this way, guys. This testing is just another tool used for GMs and scouts and organizations to get another better understanding of the player that they're drafting. And it is not the gut punch. If you do bad, you're all of a sudden that means you're going to be a bad player in the league. That does not mean that. It also doesn't mean that if you test well, you're going to be a great player in the league. There's plenty of smart guys in the league that, ended up, not having a great success in the NFL due to other limitations that happen in the world. Again, this cognitive test is just another tool for teams to get a better understanding of who they're drafting. So, is it something that can deter someone away? It absolutely can. It just depends on how much initiative a team puts into this testing to determine that, right? Now, we know that GMs like Dave Tepper, who is the GM of the Carolina Panthers, is very high on this cognitive testing, saying that, this is one of the most important factors for him. So, with that being in mind, with the fact that we know CJ Stroud did not test as well as the rest of some of these other guys did, I think it was safe to say that regardless of what his score was, he, I think, had the worst score of the top four that everyone is talking about when it comes to Bryce Young, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. Those are the four, and I think Stroud tested the worst out of the four. So that could very much be a type of thing where if a GM who values that testing so much more is choosing between two guys, that might be the thing that separates them from the rest of it. If it came down to just that, that might be a thing where that team may draft based off of who they think is more well put together up here in that moment for the quarterback position. And that could really decide a lot of things for whatever team is drafting. For me personally, I do not think that this should deter a team away from it, from CJ Stroud specifically, especially the Indianapolis Colts, because I will admit it definitely can be a little bit of a concern. It can be a little bit of a concern. You want to have a guy that has a lot of it there, right? You want to have a guy that's going to understand the circumstances and react to it quickly, right? Like that's the whole point of the cognitive test, is how quickly and effectively can you react to certain things happening. And if Stroud doesn't have as good of a score as the rest of these guys, that definitely can be a concern. It's something that you need to work on as time builds, because you're just working on improving mental skills, and that's something that a lot of teams do anyway. But at the end of the day, guys, what's most important is what you see on the film, right? Like, this cognitive test does not determine how good of a football player you are. It does not determine what kind of leader you are. It does not determine what your character is. It only refers to cognitive thinking on certain circumstances on a football field. That's that. The rest of it can be all good, and that's just another thing to add to it. It can either be a factor that really hurts you based on who is thinking about it, and it could be another factor where it could really help you depending on who's thinking about it, or it could just mean almost nothing to a guy that just really doesn't care that much about the test. It just all depends on who's going after it. And at the end of the day, I would love to see if that's what ends up, being the difference maker for the Indianapolis Colts, right? I mean, say the Carolina Panthers do go with Bryce Young due to the fact that Bryce Young, we know, has a big score. And then the rest of these guys, if all of them are still there at 4, does that cognitive test mean something to Chris Ballard and to the scouts and who they want to draft, right? Like, who does that make a difference to them? Because we've been hearing the reports of Will Levis being a dark horse for Indianapolis. Again, it just all depends on what they want, right? And we've heard Steichen. He just wants high character guys and guys who are dedicated to the game of football. And that's going to be the big aspect of this. So let me know your thoughts, guys, on what you think of the S2 cognitive testing. Do you think it's going to play a bigger role in this upcoming draft class for these quarterbacks? Or do you think that it's not going to make much of a difference when it comes to Chris Ballard's sake? But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.